Welcome to 404 Phantom, a digital vault of stories that shouldn't exist. Here, forgotten files, corrupted memories, and artificial nightmares are reconstructed, line by terrifying line. These are not just stories, they're fragments, echoes, warnings. Press play, and you may never log out the same again.
I didn't notice them at first. That's the embarrassing part, because their house is 3 doors down from mine, with the same pebble-dashed walls and the same box hedge that everyone on our street pretends to trim properly. The curtains were always drawn, the driveway always empty, no bins ever out. But in a street like ours, the quiet houses blend in. People work nights, people stay with family, people keep to themselves. And then one morning, I saw a car. It was parked on their drive like it had always been there. Dark color, no plates I could see from my angle. A thin layer of dust on the bonnet, like it hadn't moved in weeks. Yet it hadn't been there the day before. I would have noticed. I'm not proud of this, but I'm one of those people who clocks every change, every new scratch on the curb, every new sign in someone's window. It's how I keep myself busy. It's how I prove I'm still paying attention. At first, I told myself I'd simply missed it. The next day, the car was gone again. No tire marks on the drive, no little oil stain, nothing, just empty concrete. That's when I started watching. Not in the peering through curtains like a lunatic way. More checking, glancing, casual. I'd walk to the corner shop and look, and the house would look the same as it always had. Curtains drawn, no movement, no sound. The hedge too neat for a place that supposedly had no one living in it. A few nights later, I took the bins out, and their bins were there too. 2 black wheelie bins, perfectly aligned at the edge of their driveway. No grime on the lids, no scuffs on the wheels, like brand new props. I stared at them for a full 10 seconds, trying to remember if they'd been there earlier. They hadn't. I know they hadn't. I walked inside, heart doing that stupid little skip it does when your brain feels threatened but doesn't know why. I made myself a tea. I told myself it was nothing. And then I looked again. The bins were gone. That was the moment it stopped being odd and became something else. Because bins don't do that. I did what everyone does when they're scared but don't want to admit it. I looked for a rational explanation. Teenagers messing about. Someone dragging them back in. A delivery I'd missed. A neighbour's kid collecting them. Except I never saw a person. Not once. Not a glimpse of a sleeve through a gap in the curtain. Not a shape behind the frosted glass on the front door. And that was the thing that started to gnaw at me. Everything changed, but nothing moved. Not while I was looking. So I tested it. I stood at my front window at 7:30 a.m. on a weekday, pretending I was waiting for a parcel. Across the road, old Mr. Hargreaves was loading his shopping into his boot. A woman was walking a dog in a pink harness. Normal street stuff. And outside that house, nothing. Just the curtains. Still. Dead. Like the fabric was nailed to the frame. I stared until my eyes watered. I looked away for 2 seconds to check my phone. When I looked back, their upstairs curtain was open by an inch. Just enough to show darkness behind it. No movement. No flutter. It was simply different. It hit me like a punch. They'd done it. In the time my eyes were down. Not even a proper blink. A glance. That day I took a photo. I wanted proof. I wanted to tell myself I wasn't imagining it. I held my phone up and zoomed in on the house. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet shot of curtains and brick. The photo looked normal. I looked away. I looked back. And there was a shape at the upstairs window. behind the tiny gap in the curtain. Not a face, not a silhouette with features, more like a thickness in the darkness, a person-shaped absence, and the worst part, it was standing still, not because it was frozen, not because it was hiding, because it didn't need to move, because I was looking. My throat went dry. I lowered the phone. When I raised it again, the gap in the curtain was gone. Curtains closed. Perfect again. I checked the photo. The photo was normal. No shape, no gap, just curtains. Like my phone had recorded what should have been there, not what was. That night I barely slept. Every time I drifted off, I'd jerk awake and look at the time. 2:14, 3:02, 4:31. At 4:58, I heard something outside. Not footsteps, not a door, a scrape, like something heavy being dragged across concrete, very slowly, in careful increments. I got up and went to the upstairs landing. The streetlight outside threw a dull orange wash across the road, and there they were. 2 figures. On the pavement outside the quiet house, standing with their arms at their sides, perfectly upright, perfectly still. Like mannequins someone had forgotten to move back indoors. I stared at them so hard my eyes hurt. My breath was loud in my own ears. The only other sound was the faint rustle of leaves. They were too far away to see faces clearly, but I knew, some instinct in me knew. If I blinked, they would be closer. I didn't blink. My eyes watered. Tears pooled. The world went slightly blurry at the edges. One of them was taller than the other, both thin, too thin, like they'd been stretched. I held my gaze, refusing to look away. And then, in my peripheral vision, I saw movement. Not from them, from inside my own house. A soft shift in darkness at the end of the landing. It wasn't a person. It was something that looked like the absence of light had learned to stand upright. My mind did a weird, panicked calculation. If I looked away from the window, the figures outside could move. If I kept looking, whatever was inside could move. I was suddenly aware of how stupid the human body is. How you can't keep your eyes open forever. How you can't stare down a nightmare and win by refusing to blink. I did the only thing I could think to do. I turned the landing light on. Bright, harsh, normal. The darkness at the end of the hall was gone. It didn't vanish like smoke. It wasn't dramatic. It was just not there. I whipped back to the window. The pavement outside was empty. No figures, no movement, nothing. Like they'd never been there at all. But on the driveway of the quiet house, the car was back, parked perfectly, dust-free, as if it had arrived seconds ago. The next day, I went for a walk at lunchtime, pretending I was casual. The street looked normal. People came and went, except that house. Curtains shut again. I stopped outside the gate. I stared at the front door. No mail, no sign of life, no doorbell camera, no hanging basket, no scuffs on the step. And then, to my right, I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. A small plaque on the wall beside the door, a neat rectangle of metal with letters stamped into it. I hadn't seen it yesterday, or ever. I leaned in. It didn't have a name. It had a number, not the house number. Something else. A string of digits, too many, like a serial code. I tried to read it, but my eyes kept sliding off it. My brain kept refusing to hold it in place. I looked away for half a second, blinked, then looked back. The plaque was gone, just bare pebble dash. I stood there with my hand hovering near where it had been, feeling ridiculous. Then I heard a soft sound from behind me, a breath, not my own. I didn't turn. I stayed frozen, staring at the empty wall, because in that moment I understood the rule. They moved when you weren't looking, but they also moved when you couldn't see. And there are ways to not see something without closing your eyes, like facing the wrong direction, like standing still while something stands behind you. I walked home without turning my back to the house. I did it in small steps, eyes locked on the curtains, like I was backing away from an aggressive dog. When I finally reached my own gate, I went inside and locked the door. Then I stood in my hallway and listened. My house was quiet, too quiet. I made myself look around. I forced myself to check corners, check doorways, check the mirror in the hall. Normal. But when I passed the mirror, my reflection looked delayed. Not like a lag on a screen, not a glitch. Like my reflection needed a moment to decide what expression to copy. I stopped. I stared at myself. My reflection stared back. Then I looked away, just for a second, to prove to myself I was being paranoid. When I looked back, my reflection was smiling. I wasn't. It held a smile for a moment, as if it was waiting for me to match it. Then it relaxed into my normal face. That's when I realized it wasn't just the neighbor's house. It was the idea of neighbors. It was the space between houses, the gaps in attention, the blind spots we live with every day. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing stupid things that felt sensible at the time. I taped paper over the bathroom mirror. I closed every curtain. I turned on every light. I set up my phone on a tripod facing the hallway and hit record, like that would somehow protect me. At dusk, I dared myself to peek through the living room curtain. The quiet house looked the same, but the front garden was different. The hedge had been cut lower, too neat, newly trimmed, and standing in the shadow beside their front door was a figure, very still, facing my house, not moving, waiting. I watched it until my chest ached. It didn't do anything. It didn't need to, because it knew what I knew. Eventually, my eyes would have to blink. My attention would slip. I would look away. I decided to prove myself wrong one last time. I raised my phone and started recording through the gap in the curtain, keeping the figure in frame. I watched the screen, not the window. The figure stood there, still. The streetlight flickered once. The video feed on my phone stuttered for the tiniest moment, like the frame rate dropped. And in that tiny stutter, the figure moved. Not a step, not a shift. It simply occupied less distance. It was closer, still outside the neighbor's door, but now the line of its body was clearer, longer, too straight. I felt my stomach drop. I kept recording, hands shaking, staring at the phone screen. The feed stuttered again, closer, again, closer. Each movement happened in the gap between frames, not while I blinked, while the phone did. The realization hit me hard. It wasn't about my eyes. It was about attention. Any lapse, any interruption, any moment where something, anything wasn't being observed. They could move. My phone screen froze. The recording stopped. A message popped up. File corrupted. I looked up from the phone to the window. The figure was no longer at their door. It was at the end of my driveway, standing under the streetlight, arms at its sides, perfectly still, facing my front door. And behind it, on the quiet house's driveway, the car was gone. The bins were out. The curtains were open by an inch. Like the house had finally woken up. Like the street had been updated. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stood in my living room, lights on, curtains closed, holding my phone like a useless weapon. The figure didn't move. It didn't need to, because it had already learned something about me. It had learned that I watch, that I notice, that I pay attention. And maybe that's why it chose my street. Maybe that's why it chose me. because the more you watch, the more you create blind spots elsewhere. You can't look everywhere at once. You can't protect every corner. You can't observe the entire world. And if something only moves when it isn't being observed, then eventually it always gets closer. I don't remember going to bed. I don't remember sleeping. All I know is I woke up in the morning with my curtains open. I never sleep with them open. Outside, the street looked normal, bright, ordinary. The quiet house had its curtains closed again. No car, no bins, like nothing had ever happened. I sat up, heart pounding, and noticed something at the foot of my bed. A faint line in the carpet, like something heavy had been dragged. A single, straight groove leading from my bedroom door to the edge of the bed, as if someone had stood there for a long time, as if they'd leaned in close, watching, waiting for me to look away. And the strangest part, when I got up and went to the window, there was a new house number plaque on my wall outside, not my number. A longer string of digits, too many, like a serial code. And when I looked away and looked back, it was still there. Because this time, it wasn't their house that had changed. It was mine.
You've just listened to another cursed fragment from 404 Phantom. If you made it this far, you're already part of the data. Subscribe, or the next story might be written about you.